the city before the gates are closed. If you hurry, you can still catch up with them." As soon as the soldiers had left, Rahab went up into the attic and said to the men, "I know that your God is going to give you this country because he is powerful and protects you. Everyone has heard about it, and they are afraid of your people. If you swear to me that if this city is captured, nothing will happen to my relatives, then I will rescue you." And the men swore on their lives that nothing bad would happen to either Rahab or her relatives. Then Rahab took a long red piece of rope and tied it to her attic window. And the men said to her, "If you leave the rope hanging in the window, we will spare everyone in your house when we do capture the city." And then they left, climbing out of the window, and because the house was built against the city wall, they were able to climb straight down it. Rahab whispered after the men, "Go and hide in the mountains for a few days. The soldiers won't find you there, and then you can return to your people." The Israelites had crossed the river in the land that people called Jordan and had set up camp on the plains in front of the city of Jericho. Out of fear, the people living there had all the gates locked tightly, and nobody could come in or go out of the city. Then God said to Joshua, "Listen, this is how you will take the city. Once every day for 6 days, you must circle it with all your warriors. 7 priests should approach the walls and blow the 7 trumpets of the Ark of the Lord's covenant. But on the 7th day, go around the city 7 times. On the last blast of the trumpets, all of the people should let out a mighty battle cry. Then the walls of Jericho will fall in, and you can conquer Jericho." And so it came to pass, just as God had ordered. Without speaking a word, the Israelites circled the closed city for 6 days, and only the hollow sound of the trumpets could be heard. It was ghostly and terrifying. Then, on the morning of the 7th day, as the horns blew a 7th time, the Israelites broke out into a terrible war cry. The walls of Jericho collapsed in on themselves in a terrible cloud of dust. And the warriors of the people of Israel stormed into the city from all sides. They destroyed everything and spared no one's life. Only Rahab and her relatives were rescued because she had helped the Israelite scouts. Rahab joined the people of Israel, and she became the mother of the tribe of David, who went on to become king of Israel. Joshua conquered many more cities, and his fame spread wide and far. After his death, judges, who were the wisest men amongst the people of Israel, ruled the land. And many years later, Saul became the first king of the Israelites.
The story of Ruth and Naomi. The Israelites had divided the land of Canaan amongst the 12 tribes and had been living for many years in the Promised Land. In the small town of Bethlehem, in the tribal land of Judah, there lived a woman with her husband and 2 sons who was called Naomi. One day, a great famine spread through the land. So Naomi and her family decided to leave Bethlehem and to move to the country of Moab, because there was enough food there. But soon after they arrived there, Naomi's husband died. After a period of mourning, her 2 sons married 2 Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and they lived happily and contentedly in Moab for 10 years. Then Naomi's 2 sons also died. So she decided to move back to her home country with her daughters-in-law, because travelers had told her that the famine in Judah had ended. But during the journey, Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, "You should both return to your families, because there you will be safe and will have the chance to marry again. Don't stay with me. My husband and my sons are both gone, and I will not be able to protect you." But Orpah and Ruth both started to cry. They didn't want to leave their mother-in-law, but to continue on with her. But Naomi kept trying to convince them, and finally Orpah did make her way tearfully back to her family. But Ruth wouldn't listen to her mother-in-law and said to her, "I will go on with you, because your people are my people, and your God is my God. Wherever you go, I will follow you." And so they continued their journey together. When they reached Bethlehem, all the people in the town gathered around. "Isn't that Naomi who left the country years ago? Where are her husband and her sons, and who is that young woman with her?" Naomi told them all about her sad story and said, "I left here with my husband and children to go abroad, but now I am back as a poor woman." Then she went with Ruth to a little hut in one of the fields belonging to her relative Boaz. He had stayed in Bethlehem during the famine and had since become very rich. As they were so tired after their long journey, Naomi and Ruth soon lay down and fell asleep. The next morning, Ruth said to her mother-in-law, "We are poor and do not own anything. I will go into the fields and ask if I can collect the leftover ears of corn so that we have something to eat at least." In Israel at that time, it was in fact a law that the poor people in the area were allowed to collect ears of corn after the big harvest. So Ruth went out into the fields and asked the servant woman working there for permission. When Boaz came to the fields, he saw Ruth amongst the servant women and asked his servant, "Who is that girl working with the other women? Send her to me. I would like to get to know her." "She is a Moabite who came with her relative Naomi," the servant answered, and called after Ruth. When Ruth came to Boaz, he said to her, "Don't be afraid, nobody is going to hurt you. You can collect as much as you want from my fields." "But I am a stranger. Why are you so good to me?" Ruth asked Boaz, as she bowed down deeply before him. "They have told me how much you have done for my relative Naomi. I admire your courage. The Lord God of Israel will repay you and reward you richly. Apart from that, you are a hard worker, and you have won my affection." They went into the house together and ate a meal. Boaz eventually fell deeply in love with Ruth and married her, and in that way God did reward her courage and her faithfulness. He made her one of the richest and most respected women in Bethlehem. When her first son was born, she named him Obed, and Obed was the grandfather of King David, who went on to rule the people of Israel after King Saul.
How David defeated Goliath. When Saul became the king of Israel, he was constantly having to fight wars with foreign tribes who wanted to rule his kingdom. Hardly had one battle ended when another one began. This time it was the Philistines who advanced on King Saul with a mighty battle force and wanted to defeat his army. The Philistines had set up camp on one side of the plain and the Israelites on the other. But the warriors of the people of Israel were very afraid, because they had many less soldiers and weapons than the Philistines, and they were especially afraid of Goliath, the Philistines' leading warrior. He was more than 3 meters tall and frightening to look at. He wore a helmet and a breastplate of shining bronze, and his legs were protected by heavy metal greaves. On his back he wore a double-handed sword, and the spear he carried had a sharp tip of iron and was as big as a tree. Every morning and evening, Goliath stood before the Israelites and taunted them. "Why did you come here? Do you really want to fight? Just look at yourselves. You're all cowards. If you really think you're brave, send a man who will fight me. If he defeats me, we will become your slaves. But if I defeat him, then you will have to become our slaves and serve us.